Have you ever noticed how exhausting it becomes to maintain the carefully constructed version of yourself that you think others need to see? That perpetual performance where you monitor every word, every expression, every reaction to ensure you remain acceptable, lovable, worthy of inclusion in a world that seems to reward conformity above all else? There comes a moment in every awakening soul's journey when this elaborate dance of people-pleasing begins to feel not just tiresome, but genuinely toxic to your very essence. It's as if you've been wearing a mask for so long that you've forgotten the contours of your own face beneath it, and suddenly, the mask begins to feel suffocating, restrictive, like a prison made of others' expectations and your own desperate need for approval. The weight of constantly scanning the emotional landscape around you, adjusting your energy to match what you think others need, becomes unbearable when you finally realize that you've lost touch with your own authentic responses to life. This is not a small discomfort or a minor inconvenience. This is a spiritual emergency of the highest order, because your very soul is being slowly compressed into a shape that was never meant to contain its true essence. Every time you swallow your authentic response to smile instead, every time you nod in agreement when your inner knowing screams in opposition, every time you make yourself smaller to fit into spaces that weren't designed for your full expression, you commit a tiny act of self-violence that accumulates over time into a profound disconnection from your own life force. Think of the snake that must shed its skin to continue growing. The old skin served its purpose perfectly for a time, protecting the tender new growth beneath, but eventually it becomes a constraint that threatens to strangle the very life force it once preserved. The snake doesn't ask permission from other snakes before beginning this process. It doesn't conduct surveys to ensure that its new skin will be aesthetically pleasing to the forest creatures around it. When the time comes, the shedding happens with an urgency that brooks no delay, because to resist this natural metamorphosis would mean death, a slow strangulation by that which once provided safety. The process is often uncomfortable, sometimes painful, requiring the snake to rub against rough surfaces to struggle and twist until the old skin finally releases its hold. But here's what makes the human experience infinitely more complex than the snake's natural shedding process. We have been conditioned to believe that our old skin, our people-pleasing patterns, our carefully constructed personas, are not just protective mechanisms but moral virtues. We've been taught that sacrificing our authenticity for others' comfort is love, that managing everyone's emotional reactions is responsibility, that never causing disappointment is kindness. This conditioning runs so deep that when we begin to feel the stirrings of our authentic nature, pushing against these constraints, we often interpret this natural impulse toward growth as selfishness, as spiritual regression, as a betrayal of our values. The human ego, with its intricate web of people-pleasing strategies, operates much like that outgrown skin. What begins as a survival mechanism in childhood, a way to secure love and avoid abandonment, gradually transforms into an elaborate prison that constrains the authentic self trying to emerge. You learn to read the room with microscopic precision, to anticipate what others need from you, to become a chameleon of sorts, shifting colors and patterns to match whatever environment you find yourself in. And for a while, this works beautifully. You become beloved for your adaptability, praised for your selflessness, valued for your ability to make others comfortable. But beneath this carefully orchestrated performance, something wild and untamed continues to grow, something that refuses to be contained by the limitations of others' comfort zones. The tragedy is that most people never realize they're slowly dying inside this prison of perpetual performance. They mistake the exhaustion for normal adult responsibility, the emptiness for spiritual humility, the loss of vitality for maturity. They convince themselves that the dull ache in their chest is simply the cost of being a good person, that the growing disconnect from their own desires and dreams is proof of their selflessness. They create elaborate justifications for why their authentic self must remain hidden, why their true thoughts and feelings are too dangerous, too selfish, too overwhelming for the people around them to handle. This is where the spiritual journey becomes genuinely dangerous to the status quo of your relationships, your social position, your carefully maintained image as someone who never rocks the boat. The awakening consciousness doesn't ask for permission before it begins to question everything you once accepted without thought. It doesn't care that your new insights might make others uncomfortable, that your growing authenticity might threaten those who have become dependent on your people-pleasing patterns, that your expanding awareness might illuminate uncomfortable truths about the collective agreements everyone around you has made to remain asleep. The most insidious aspect of chronic people-pleasing is how it disguises itself as love, as kindness, as spiritual virtue. You tell yourself that you're being compassionate when you withhold your truth to avoid making others uncomfortable. You believe you're practicing selflessness when you sacrifice your authentic expression on the altar of others' approval. You convince yourself that you're maintaining harmony when you swallow your genuine responses to preserve a peace that is actually built on pretense and mutual deception. But what you're really doing is enabling a collective unconsciousness that keeps everyone trapped in limited versions of themselves. The pattern becomes so automatic that you stop noticing when you're betraying yourself. You feel the familiar tightness in your throat when you're about to speak your truth, and without conscious thought, you adjust your words to something safer, something more palatable, something that won't disturb the delicate balance of everyone's comfort zones. You sense someone's hunger for a particular kind of reassurance, and you provide it even when your authentic perspective is entirely different. You perceive their unspoken need for agreement, and you offer it even when your inner knowing rebels against the very ideas you're supporting. I want to pause for a moment and ask you directly, when was the last time you spoke your complete truth in a situation where you knew it might make someone uncomfortable? When did you last choose authenticity over approval, knowing that the cost might be someone's disappointment or even rejection? That moment when you feel your real response rising in your throat and you watch yourself swallow it down, replacing it with what you think the other person needs to hear instead. I know this pattern intimately because we've all learned it so thoroughly that it feels like breathing. You sense someone's expectation hovering in the air between you, and automatically, without conscious thought, you begin to contort yourself to meet it. You feel their unspoken need for reassurance, and you provide it even when doing so requires you to deny your own uncertainty. You perceive their hunger for a particular kind of response, and you feed it even when your authentic reaction is entirely different. I want you to know that this automatic self-betrayal is killing something essential in you, that the part of you that is most alive, most creative, most capable of genuine contribution to this world is being slowly suffocated by your compulsive need to manage other people's comfort levels. And that's why I'd like to invite you to share something real in the comments below. You can simply copy this phrase and complete it. I betray myself when I. By acknowledging this pattern, you not only begin to free yourself from its grip, but you also give permission to someone else who might be watching this video to recognize their own self-betrayal patterns. Your honesty might be the key that unlocks someone else's courage to choose authenticity over approval. This community of people learning to tell the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, grows stronger every time we witness each other's commitment to authenticity. Like candles being lit from other candles, each person's willingness to be real ignites the possibility for others to do the same. Now let's continue exploring what happens when you finally decide that preserving others' comfort is less important than preserving your own soul. The awakening process inevitably leads you to confront a terrifying truth. You cannot continue growing spiritually while simultaneously managing everyone else's emotional reactions to your growth. These two commitments are fundamentally incompatible, like trying to run a marathon while carrying someone on your back who has no interest in reaching the destination. The weight of their resistance, their fear, their investment in keeping you exactly as you were, will eventually exhaust your forward momentum entirely. This realization often comes with a profound grief because it means acknowledging that some relationships in your life have been built on a foundation of your inauthenticity. The people who love the version of you that never challenges them, never questions the assumptions they've built their lives upon, never reflects back to them the possibility that there might be more to existence than the narrow band of experience they've chosen to inhabit. When you begin to change, when you start speaking truths that pierce through comfortable illusions, when you stop participating in the collective agreements that keep everyone safely unconscious, these relationships reveal their conditional nature. The person who has built their sense of security around your perpetual availability suddenly feels abandoned when you begin setting boundaries. The friend who has relied on your agreement with their worldview feels threatened when you start seeing reality from angles they haven't considered. The family member who has cast you in the role of the accommodating one feels angry when you begin to honor your own needs with the same devotion you once reserved for theirs. The colleague who has depended on your silence about workplace dysfunctions feels betrayed when you begin speaking truth about what you observe. This is the moment when you must choose between two forms of destruction: the slow death of continued self-betrayal, or the temporary destruction of relationships that cannot survive your authenticity. Both paths involve loss, but only one leads to rebirth. The person who chooses to preserve everyone else's comfort by continuing to hide their true nature experiences a particular kind of spiritual suicide, a gradual erasure of everything that makes them uniquely themselves. Yet there's a beautiful paradox at work here. Because the very people you've been trying so desperately to please are often unconsciously hungry for the authenticity you've been withholding. They may resist it initially, may feel uncomfortable when you begin speaking from your deepest truth, but somewhere in their souls they recognize the relief of being in the presence of someone who has stopped pretending. Your willingness to be real gives them permission to question their own patterns of performance and pretense. Your people-pleasing patterns don't actually serve the people you're trying to please. They serve the collective agreement to remain unconscious, to avoid the discomfort of growth, to maintain systems and relationships that have outlived their usefulness. When you consistently prioritize others' comfort over truth, you become an enabler of their spiritual stagnation, a co-conspirator in the very patterns that keep everyone trapped in limited versions of themselves. The journey toward authentic expression often feels like learning to breathe underwater at first. Everything in your conditioning screams that you'll die if you stop managing others' reactions, that you'll be abandoned if you speak your truth, that you'll destroy everything good in your life if you stop being who everyone needs you to be. But gradually, as you practice small acts of authenticity, as you risk tiny moments of genuine expression, you discover that the opposite is true. The relationships that survive your authenticity become deeper, more honest, more nourishing than anything you experienced during your people-pleasing phase. The people who can handle your truth are the ones capable of real intimacy, real connection, real love. The ones who cannot were never really loving you anyway. They were loving their idea of you, their projection of who they needed you to be to maintain their own comfort. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or inconsiderate. It means developing the discernment to recognize when accommodation serves love and when it serves fear. It means learning to distinguish between genuine compassion and codependent self-sacrifice. It means understanding that your highest service to others might sometimes involve disappointing them, challenging them, or refusing to participate in patterns that keep everyone limited. The spiritual warrior learns to navigate this territory with tremendous skill, speaking truth with love but without apology, setting boundaries with kindness but without negotiation, honoring others' feelings without taking responsibility for managing them. This is perhaps the most advanced practice in human relationships, remaining open-hearted while refusing to abandon yourself, maintaining connection while honoring your authentic expression. There's a particular type of loneliness that accompanies this phase of awakening, a loneliness that cuts deeper than ordinary solitude because it involves watching people you care about choose comfort over growth, familiarity over truth, the known limitations over unknown possibilities. You begin to see how invested everyone around you is in maintaining the status quo, how threatened they become when you start embodying alternatives to the collective agreements about how life should be lived. But this loneliness is also a doorway to a deeper kind of connection, because it forces you to seek out others who are also committed to authentic living, who understand that real love sometimes requires risking everything comfortable for something true. These relationships, when you find them, have a quality of aliveness and depth that makes all the superficial connections of your people-pleasing phase seem like pale shadows by comparison. The transformation from people-pleaser to authentic being is not a gentle evolution. It's more like a controlled demolition of everything you thought you were supposed to be. It requires you to examine every relationship, every commitment, every way of being in the world through the lens of truth rather than convenience. Some structures in your life will survive this examination and emerge stronger. Others will crumble because they were built on foundations of pretense and mutual avoidance. What emerges from this destruction is something remarkable, a life that actually belongs to you. For perhaps the first time since childhood, you begin to experience what it feels like to live from your authentic center, rather than from the surface of constant performance. You discover that your real thoughts, your genuine feelings, your authentic perspectives are not the dangerous, selfish, overwhelming forces you were taught to believe they were. They are the very source of your creativity, your vitality, your capacity for genuine connection. The fear that drove your people-pleasing patterns begins to reveal itself as a phantom, a boogeyman created by past experiences of rejection and abandonment that no longer have any bearing on your current reality. You realize that most of the people you've been so desperately trying to please were never really that invested in your performance anyway. They were simply comfortable with the familiar dynamic and resistant to change, not because your authenticity would truly harm them, but because it would require them to examine their own patterns of pretense. When you finally understand that your awakening serves not just your own evolution, but the evolution of everyone whose life you touch, the choice becomes clear. You cannot give others what you do not possess yourself. You cannot model authentic living while trapped in inauthentic patterns. You cannot inspire others to embrace their truth while you continue to hide yours. The people who are meant to walk alongside you on this journey of conscious living will find ways to meet you in your authenticity. They may need time to adjust. They may struggle initially with the changes in you, but if there is genuine love and connection between you, they will find ways to honor both your growth and their own comfort. The relationships that cannot survive this transformation were never built on a foundation solid enough to support real intimacy anyway. Your awakening is not a luxury or a hobby. It is a responsibility to life itself, to the consciousness that moves through you, to the generations that will follow. When you choose authenticity over approval, you contribute to a collective healing that reaches far beyond your immediate circle. You become part of a movement toward greater honesty, deeper connection, more genuine ways of being human together. The courage to disappoint others in service of your truth is perhaps the greatest gift you can give to a world that is drowning in pretense, suffocating under layers of social conditioning that no longer serve the evolution of consciousness. Your willingness to be real, even when it's uncomfortable, creates permission for others to do the same. Trust that life supports your authentic expression, even when the people around you initially resist it. Trust that the relationships meant to flourish in the soil of truth will do so, while those built on the sand of pretense will naturally dissolve. Trust that your commitment to honoring your deepest nature serves the highest good, even when the immediate consequences feel challenging. What emerges from this crucible of authentic living is a life of such richness, such depth, such genuine connection, that you wonder how you ever settled for the pale substitute of people-pleasing. You discover that being truly known and loved for who you are is infinitely more satisfying than being conditionally accepted for who you pretend to be. If these reflections on choosing authenticity over approval have stirred something deep within you, know that you've found a sanctuary here for those brave enough to live truthfully. This path of genuine self-expression can feel overwhelmingly lonely when you're surrounded by people who prefer the comfort of mutual pretense to the adventure of authentic relationship. It's precisely for this reason that we've gathered this community of truth-tellers, this refuge for those learning to honor their deepest nature. By subscribing to the channel, you join a quiet revolution of people who have decided that being real is more important than being liked, that speaking truth is more valuable than managing comfort, that authentic connection is worth the temporary discomfort of disappointing those who prefer you unconscious. Each video we share offers another perspective on how to navigate this challenging terrain of conscious living without losing your capacity for love and connection. We're not here to encourage you toward reckless honesty or inconsiderate self-expression. We're here to explore together how to honor both your authentic nature and your genuine care for others, how to speak truth with skillful means, how to set boundaries with an open heart. This is the territory of spiritual maturity, where awakening meets the practical challenges of human relationship. If you feel called toward greater authenticity, but fear the consequences of being truly seen, this channel is your training ground. Subscribe, and allow yourself to be supported by reflections that honor both the courage required for authentic living and the tenderness needed to navigate its challenges. Together, we create a field of permission for others to step out of the exhausting performance of people-pleasing and into the relief of genuine self-expression. A simple click on the subscription button is a declaration. I choose truth over comfort. I choose authenticity over approval. I choose to be destroyed and reborn rather than slowly suffocated by who I think I should be. And in a world that desperately needs people brave enough to be real, this choice becomes a gift not just to yourself, but to everyone whose life you touch with your authentic presence.